Hi, and welcome to Untethered with Jen Liss, the podcast that's here to help you break free, be you, and unleash your inner brilliance. I'm your host, Jen, and in this episode, we are going to talk about how to light up the world with ecstasy and play. Let's dive in. Hey there, friend. It's Jen. On the podcast today, we have Allison Holley. On this conversation with Allison, we are going to dive into some different realms. We talk about human consciousness. We talk about God. We talk about spirit. We talk about source energy, higher frequencies, all kinds of very interesting concepts. And really, Allison was so kind to break down some of these concepts for us and to talk about why some of these things really matter to us today and in this world, and what the heck all of these things have to do with ecstasy and play. In Allison's eyes, those are two of the most vital things that we can be experiencing and doing in this lifetime. And ecstasy and play are a means of shining your brightest light and elevating into higher frequencies that can elevate the entire world. It's an incredible and interesting conversation hearing her perspective. Allison is a channel, and she's also the author of multiple books, The Era of the True Creator, and her latest book, Ecstatic Playground. After experiencing a profound awakening in 2012, Allison began spontaneously channeling and receiving visions of the world to come. She actually left her former life to integrate this experience that she had had, and eventually began teaching and channeling for others. And today, she is an intuitive guide, a channeling teacher, and an ecstatic sexuality coach. So get ready for this fascinating conversation. And I know that there is going to be something really interesting for you to get curious about by the end of it. So without further ado, I welcome to the podcast, Allison Holley. Hi, Allison.
Hi, Jen. It's so good to be here. I was dancing right before we jumped on this call. I was like, how do I get ready for this?
It's so perfect. I usually
Yes.
dance, Allison, before every podcast interview. And it's funny. It's so funny that you say that, because I just, right before we hit record, I was like, I would love to just take a breath. And you suggested opening our hearts. And so we took this nice heart opening breath. I generally dance before a podcast interview, and I didn't today because I was coming straight from something, and just that moment of centering ourselves got me that little moment of bliss that I usually get from dancing.
Absolutely. And I mean, we're kind of starting right in, but I love how real you are with it, because life happens with all of us. We all get really busy. We all get, feelings of being off center a little bit or a lot. And it can be as simple as taking a breath or dancing to one song, or even just listening to a song and kind of feeling it, anything. We can take just a moment and it can help us. So, and also just a moment can kind of throw us off. So it's all okay. It's all beautiful.
It's so true. And this sets us off really in the perfect place for talking about who you are and what you do, because you have a new book that is talking about ecstatic play and dance. So tell us a little bit about what inspired you. Why do you care so much, first of all, about something? It takes a lot to sit down and write a book. So congratulations. You obviously care a lot about this. Why is this something that you feel like right now is something that people need, and that you felt so compelled to write a book about it?
So I'll kind of start at the beginning. This is my second book. And the first one was called The Era of the True Creator. This one's called Ecstatic Playground. I have it right here. So Ecstatic Playground, as soon as I hit publish on the first book, I got the message, study play. I heard, how can I play more with this? And then I heard study play. That's what your next book is about. And I talk about this in the introduction of my book, but I really thought this is good news. I really thought this is super exciting. I get to write a book about play. And I really thought it was going to be fun and easy. And that was about 4 years ago. So what ended up happening was I got years of study into what makes it so hard for us as humans to play. Why can't we play? And I didn't realize that's what I was studying. What I experienced was a dip into some of the lower frequency or more uncomfortable spaces that we occupy as humans sometimes. So I went through some really, really rough stuff. And all the while, I was kind of beating up on myself, like, dude, you're writing a book about play, embody this. And I was like, but life is crazy, right? And it really, really got heavy for moments there. And interspersed with that, of course, were these beautiful, blissful moments. So it wasn't all hard. But when I finally discovered, oh, I'm learning why this is hard. I'm learning why people can't treat life as a playground. And a few of those reasons are things that are embedded in us right away. As soon as, for me, it was as soon as I went into the womb. It wasn't even upon birth. It was like right away. And things like, the one that I got was, what if you hurt people with your light? And I think that one's super common. So we pull it all back and we don't shine. We don't feel this. We don't let ourselves feel joy. And then that shows up, as we get further training into being a human, it shows up in things like perfectionism, control, desire to keep everything very tight, fear in so many different ways. And we just start to build these parameters on our lives where we don't even know how to start to break free. And so in this book, I dive into why do we create those things and then how do we move out of that into being a true creator, really taking command. And I introduce in this book the idea that we are gods incarnate. And so how can we play on that level as being gods and remove some of those, walls that we've really built up?
Yeah, we have so much in common. And we commented on this before we started the interview that it's no wonder that we ended up magnetizing into the same, orbit right now, because I myself, this sounds very much like a similar journey. I would love to share because it's so similar, and others who are listening might be on that path too, because I started really studying creativity. And I was, I love creativity. I care a lot about creativity. I had a group, this whole podcast started about how do we be more creative. And I just delved into really the trenches, just like what you're experiencing. It's like you start to really see, like it gets really dark and heavy. And what it points back to is the light. It points back to how we keep ourselves from shining that light in many, many ways. So I would love to hear you. I mean, you mentioned this, like, what is it that makes it hard for us to play? And you mentioned this idea of like what if I hurt people with my light? Are there any other things that that you have seen that it makes it hard for us to play? And why should we be playing in the first place? Actually?
Yeah. Well, I love that. I love that you circled back around to that question, because the truth is that everything that we do is play. It's just really our level of consciousness around it. So everything about this life is our higher self playing. It's more fun when we're conscious that we're playing. And then we start to command. We don't control, because control is this fear. Behind control is this fear that something's wrong, right? So then we've got to go in and control it. But when we let that go, we can start to see that our higher self is streaming this consciousness through, and everything about this life is already play. So the idea is really to become more conscious in the ways that show us how powerful we are. And so a lot of that, why is it important to play? It's kind of like, well, we're doing that all the time. It's more fun when we know that we're doing that. So kind of the purpose around it is just really to become more playful with this streaming of consciousness that we're doing all the time. So what are some ways that people kind of hold themselves back? I would say everything is kind of an extension of not recognizing that we are God, that we are the light, that we are streaming this fullness of God consciousness through us, and that the only thing that keeps us from being ecstatic, and I want to talk a bit more about ecstasy, but the thing that keeps us from being ecstatic all the time are the filters that we place there. And it's going to show up differently for all of us, right? We create the parameters for our own game here on Earth. So for me, for example, I could say, okay, I jumped into this world and all of a sudden I had a soul trauma, right? Like a soul level trauma of pulling my light in, and it created a physical experience where I had a lot of illness because of that. And I could say, well, that really sucks, and I could go about trying to continuously heal. Or, and this is really what I like to introduce to people, I could recognize that I am the God of this creation called being me. And I jumped into this physical experience, and right away I created different parameters that I could play with. And so all of these different things that I'm experiencing, it's my creation, not because I wanted to punish myself, not because there's anything wrong, but because everything is my creation and I wanted to play in certain ways. I wanted to learn certain things. I wanted to experience certain things. A lot of my specific play, being someone who I see myself as a star seed, and this is my first and only human lifetime, is I created certain parameters that would help me understand what it's like to be a human. Because the next part of my purpose is to sort of, cut down the weeds and lead people into this realm of play. And for me, I needed to know what people were experiencing and what people were going through. So right off the bat, I set something up that said, hey, pain's really real. Believe it. Look at what you're experiencing. It's real. It's real. And man, it feels real when we're in it. But we're the ones creating it. And so when we can get really clear on that, not from a place of self-punishment, like, oh man, I better take responsibility for everything. But it's about recognizing, okay, I created this. That means that I know how to get myself through it. That means it's already built in. I created these parameters, but I created it knowing that I would know the way through. And so that's what we go into. I'll stop there because I could go forever and ever.
Yeah. I have a question for those. You mentioned this idea of the God consciousness and that we are all creating our own reality. For someone who, in this society that we're in, and even myself a few years ago, I had gone really far away from all spirituality completely. And so things like that can be a little bit triggering sometimes when we hear that word. I remember I picked up a book that I really wanted to read and I had heard it was really good, but the word God was used so much in that book that I had a hard time reading it, that to the point where I would just scribble it out every time and like write universe because it was that much. So I say this and just, can we frame just from your perspective, if you're willing to share, like, what does that mean when you specifically say God consciousness? Are you talking about, and it's totally okay if you are, like big guy in the sky? Are you talking about something else? Like from your perspective, where are you coming from there? And even just like the starseed idea, if you can kind of simplify that and explain.
Absolutely. I'll do my best to simplify it because I feel it is really simple, but we all have our own backgrounds and where we're coming from. So if that word triggers you, you can use whatever word feels good. I'll share with you why I use the word God. First, my primary purpose is to channel information from higher realms. And so both of my books are channeled writings. So the words that came through were God. You are God. When I connect with these beings from, multidimensional planes, from when I'm channeling these ascended masters and things like that, they tell me, you are me, you are us, and we are you. So the concept of God that I understand is really oneness. if I can look at God as like this big ball of bright energy, and all of us come from there, right? That is the core of all of us. And when we're moving into these higher frequencies, we start to really recognize this oneness experience. It's an experience. It's not just a concept. So when I look at what is God, it's that big bright light. And that bright light is shooting these rainbow frequencies that come into denser and denser realms. So we're sort of this really dense realm of the projection of source energy. And as we get into denser and denser realms, we have the experience of being more and more separated. So we believe that we're separate from God. We believe that we're separate from each other. We even feel separate from ourselves. This is a very trippy experience. We get fractalized, and we don't actually become fractalized. And that's why I say we're God, because it's our perception that is fractalized so that we can be in this game, right? I wanted to have the experience of being Allison. So I said, let me just incarnate into this human body. I'm going to look like this. I'm going to have these experiences. I'm going to learn these things. And I'm also going to believe that I'm here by myself, that it's just me. And I'm going to see through these eyes. And I'm going to do that so that I can have a unique perspective. And this being right here is God looking through these eyes, looking at you as if you're something different. But guess what? These eyes are looking back at me saying, yeah, you're God too, right? And it becomes this really powerful level of the game when we start to move into this knowing that we're speaking and interacting with ourselves on multiple different frequencies from multiple different perspectives. But in this life, I get to have this experience.
Thank you for explaining this in the way that you have. I feel like it gets a little trippy, especially if we haven't studied a lot of these kinds of things. And I think we get to all feel into the way that feels really good for us as well. This particular way that you're describing feels really true to me. And it's the way that I also, it has brought me back to my spiritual essence and back to really, it just feels, it's like that rings true for me as I hear people say it, as I feel into it. And the way that you explain it, like sometimes we'll hear people say things about, you're just playing a video game or you're an avatar. And that's exactly what you're describing. It's like we all came from this source and we are the dense projection of that source living the video game. And so what you're saying, you're playing, you are the character in the video game. So you get to choose the reality that you're playing. Is that correct?
Yes. And again, a lot of times, like when the law of attraction really came onto the scene and a lot of people started to recognize, oh, I create my reality. There was this sort of reverb that was created from that where we started punishing ourselves even further. Like, oh, I create my own reality. Well, I guess I created this horrible thing that happened. We're not seeing it from the right perspective. We're not seeing it from the broad perspective if that's how we're seeing it. And I think a lot of people kind of pull back from this understanding that we're creating our reality, because how would we create something that's bad? When we're seeing it that way, it means that we're like, okay, I'm God, but I'm still seeing it like this. I'm still seeing it as this very narrow focus. In order to really perceive the fullness of what it means to create our reality, we sort of need to broaden our perspective. And it's not about, I created this specific experience and I don't understand it, so I must be being punished. It's actually, okay, we all created a myriad of experiences, and then we start to move beyond these perceptions of this is a good experience and this is a bad experience. And we start to see it without attachment. That attachment piece is really what can kind of throw us off. But if these concepts are triggering, there are a lot of different ways that we can move through that. We can kind of like you said, feel what feels right for you, go into the heart and start where you are. I just want to tell this one story. When I started channeling, one of the things that I saw, and this was super triggering for me, my channeling initially started spontaneously when I went through my awakening in 2012. And then I started practicing. I would retrace my steps and I started practicing channeling on purpose. And I was taken to a lot of different experiences and understandings. One of them, right at the beginning, was I was shown some really intense atrocities happening. And I was shown that I was actually holding space in my sort of spirit form, that I was holding space for this to happen because that soul desired for it to happen. What I was shown too is that that was a very advanced soul that was experiencing that. And I don't mean to get so heavy with this, but I know what people contest, right? I know what comes up with us when we start to say we're the creators and we're gods. Well, how could all of this bad stuff happen? Well, why would I be creating it this way? We need to back up and just let ourselves get curious with some of these concepts. This isn't about punishing ourselves. This isn't about the bad things become good. This is about letting ourselves view it all from a broader perspective and witness, and then more will be revealed. And it'll make sense beyond any words that I can use for this, which is probably why I'm using so many words.
Yeah. Well, and it's a felt, one of the things that I think really is supportive to people is that it's a felt experience. We can't fully comprehend all of this with our human mind. It's a felt experience, which really perhaps takes us back to ecstasy and some of the work that you do. Can you take us through that? I mean, what is it? Why is this a topic that you speak about and that you help to people to incorporate in their lives?
Beautiful. I love it. I'd rather talk about ecstasy. I'm like, let's go there. Okay.
We've got the groundwork laid. Now we can talk about ecstasy.
Exactly. Exactly. So in my first book, I introduce what was shown to me is called pure form consciousness. So pure form consciousness is what we are ascending into. It's what we embody as humans as we start to remove these barriers and open to more of the fullness of who we are. So pure form consciousness includes 3 different aspects. It is the heart open to giving and receiving love in its divine form. It's the mind, which is present and receptive. It's the observer mind. And then it's the body in its ecstatic state. So when this concept came to me, I actually didn't understand any of that. So if that's a big concept, then that's okay. Just walk into it. But I started having spontaneous ecstatic experiences. And in those moments, it was like everything was vibrating very quickly. And it felt ecstatic. But it felt sort of like every cell, everything in my body was dilating to allow in more light. And that's exactly what moments of ecstasy are. Okay. And we're learning how to embody that all the time. So ecstasy is essentially when we remove the barriers of human conditioning and allow the fullness of light to flow through us, we inherently feel ecstatic. Things like ecstatic dance, or, I would even say the drug ecstasy, different things like that. What they're doing is they're removing the paradigms, they're removing the barriers. So when we get into ecstatic dance, what we're really doing is free form. We're letting ourselves move in whatever way our body wants to be animated in. And in those moments, the fullness of the frequency of light can move through our bodies and we become illuminated. And ecstasy, that higher spiritual principle of ecstasy, when we experience it, it feels somewhat sexual because our bodies are built in a certain way. We're, mammals that have sex, right? And so as we're moving into this territory, the reason I talk about ecstasy so much is because when we have these really powerful experiences, in our current era, our current day and age, with the conditioning that we've received, a lot of times we don't know how to allow those energies to flow through us because we've been taught to shut down in so many different ways. So ecstasy is really just the fullness of light streaming through our bodies, minds, and consciousness. And we get to embody it as humans.
Yeah. So why would we want the fullness of light to stream through us? To what end?
A lot of different things happen when we're allowing ecstasy to move through us. Spontaneous channeling, coming into alignment with the truth of who we are, right? Because the truth of who we are is fully expanded light beings. And yet, like we talked about at the beginning, we jump in and immediately start building these walls and parameters. And all that's happening is we're conditioning ourselves to the game that other people have built. It's our game, yes, but we haven't learned how to use the controllers yet, right? We haven't quite learned how to consciously operate in this playing field.
We think we're playing Super Mario Brothers, but we're actually playing like Minecraft. You can build it yourself. You don't have to play the preformed video game.
Yeah. If I knew that reference, but yes.
You don't play a lot of other video games.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, more like we're really creating the foundation of this game. You know, it starts out pre-built, and then it starts to be, oh wow, there's a lot more that I'm actually doing in this realm than I was conscious of before. So ecstasy, like how cool is that we have all of these different levels that we get to experience pouring source light through us. And when we start to just let down those parameters that tell us we're not good enough, that tell us we're not worthy, that we're not this, that we're not that, we start to come into the present moment, then this huge amount of light streams through us and we have different experiences. So some of the experiences that we have, I mean, it can range from spontaneous channeling, you know, it can be an orgasm. It can even be an energetic orgasm. It can be light language transmission. It can be just complete bliss. You know, I myself have gone into these moments and I've witnessed other people going into these moments where we're just sobbing because it's overwhelmingly beautiful. And we're actually learning how not only to stream that through in moments, but we're learning how to be that continuously. And it literally feels like being plugged into the sun and just streaming it through. It's a very powerful experience. The first time that I had an ecstatic flow frequency in my body, I actually asked my guides, you know, because they said, this is what we're all evolving into. This is what you're learning to carry all the time. And I said, how are we supposed to carry this all the time? This is a lot. I was just, you know, standing on a bridge. I was in this beautiful nature setting and I was standing on a bridge and I was just trying to catch my breath because it was so much beautiful high frequency energy moving through me. So I would say if you like what I just described, that's why, that's motivation by itself. And really it's not about, in order to get there, we don't need to fix ourselves. We simply need to learn how to be who we truly are once again.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. So I'm just the voice of somebody who might be listening and thinking, okay, this all sounds really good. Ecstasy, bliss, channeling light, higher frequencies. Like, yeah, that sounds really good, or it might sound really weird depending on the person. Why might we want to channel? Like, what is the purpose? Do you think that anybody can? And is that something that we should be doing?
Yes. The truth is that we're all always channeling, right? Just like we're always streaming consciousness into this body, and that's what animates us. Some people call it the soul, you know, experiencing a human experience. So we're always channeling. But again, it comes down to consciousness. How conscious are we of what we're doing? So for someone who's very practically minded, what I'm going to say is you already feel something else, or you wouldn't even be listening to this. You already feel that you are more than what you have allowed yourself to perceive. There's a glimmer inside already. And that glimmer is source energy from within you reaching out to know more of yourself. So the first steps are that we start to get to know ourselves without the parameters, without so many of the parameters. And we start to heal. You know, we go through shadow work a lot of the times, or a dark night of the soul when we initially start to awaken. And what that really is it's all the things that are filtering pure source light from coming through us. So all of these things that can't hold that light, all of the beliefs around ourselves that we're not perfect, they're going to come up to the surface. I'm saying all this because that it's already started. We're all already doing it. And curiosity is our best friend. One of the ways that we can play this game the most adeptly is by letting ourselves move into curiosity. One of the parameters that we tend to build that keeps us from playing with life is the need to understand and to fit things into boxes of what we already know. So essentially, we're sort of born into this experience. We're given all these parameters. We're given the rules of the game. And then we believe them and we internalize them. So when we start to awaken, we start to see that maybe those parameters are keeping us stuck instead of helping us. Sometimes it helps us play the human game, and other times it keeps us so narrow that we don't know where to go. So just be curious. Any of these concepts, especially if it's triggering you, let yourself be curious about it, right? Let yourself be sort of fascinated by it.
Yeah. Never waste a good trigger. One of my mentors always says.
I love that. Wow. Never waste a good trigger. That's super yummy. But to go back to channeling, all of us are always channeling, but we can change where we're channeling from. A lot of times we have this sort of block. Okay, only the information that I already understand can come through. And I'm just going to recycle that again and again and again. And then we live the same experience every single day. So what we want to do is start to open that up and let ourselves be curious and start to see, maybe there's something beyond my tight parameters that my mind has created. And we can go slow with this, right? One of the benefits, though, of consciously channeling, which means consciously opening up these gateways and allowing higher consciousness to move through, is that we get new information. We get information that our soul is actually craving. We're desiring the truth of who we are. And when we move beyond the mind and receive information from beyond the mind, we can start to get that more accurate information of who we are. You know, we become insatiable almost, you know. I teach channeling, and a lot of people who are in my course on channeling, they say, you know, I have one person in particular, I'll give her a shout out right now without using her name. And she tends to say, oh, I just always want more. I always want more. I know. And I said, you know what? It's a beautiful thing to be insatiable. It's beautiful. We're here to be insatiable. We're here to just eat it all up because it's emerging from within us. That's such a big key. It's all emerging from within us. We desire it, just like we get hungry, you know, on a physical level. We get hungry for these deeper understandings and truths.
Yeah, I feel like it's a yes and, because I too agree. Like, we were made for more. That's like the name of my program that I'm running people through right now is Made for More, because I believe it is like we are made for it, and we can be patient and allow and release the outcome, release that, you know, that desire to control it and allow it to come through us, because that's where the true bliss and the ecstasy and all of the things that you're saying come. What you said about curiosity, I feel like what you described was a spiritual untethering, and kind of what you're describing just here in general. It's like untethering from the mind, untethering from all of the things that we have been taught are the way that we need to do it. From that video game that you came into, you're not stuck in that particular thing. You get to craft it yourself, which is just a beautiful way of looking at it. And you have such a unique perspective on this as somebody who comes to this from teaching people to do this as well. So thank you so much for sharing all of your perspective on this. And I know this is going to ignite a lot of curiosity and a lot of listeners, which is super exciting just to open the door to some of these conversations. So is there anything that we haven't shared here that you're like, I just really think people need to know this?
You know what? At base level, just know, oh, there's so much. At base level, because what I want to say is just know that you're love. If you're listening to this, you are love. You're incarnate love, right? God is love. You are therefore love. Okay. And I could go in 1,000 different directions with that, but that's where I'll leave it, because it's the most truth of anything. You're love. You're doing a great job.
So beautiful. Okay. Final question. Final question, which I'm really excited to ask you. Allison, where do you see the magic in the world?
Oh God, literally everywhere, in everything. And talk about ecstasy. I'm like, whoa, that question just got me. In everything, you know? Oh, let me try and synthesize this. I can't. It's in everything. Every single experience. We talk about, a lot of times when we start our awakening, we talk about things like synchronicity. And as we continue opening to more and more expanded consciousness, everything is synchronicity. Everything is a profoundly powerful, magical, infused with light moment. Everything is.
And we can see that for what it is, that it shifts everything, all of that resistance. This is your playground.
Yes.
Thank you, Allison, so much for coming on the podcast and sharing everything that you shared and for sharing your gifts with the world. Where can people find you?
Thank you. By the way, this has been so much fun, and I'm excited to continue connecting with you after this. So people can find me on my website. It's AllisonHolley.com. I'm also on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And you can just search AllisonHolley.com or look at my website.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
It was so fascinating talking to Allison and hearing her very interesting perspective. And Allison is the second person that I've had on the podcast in the past few months that talks about ecstasy, talks about pleasure as being a portal. And there's a lot more discussion about the divine, feminine, ecstatic dance, and all of these things that really used to be like not okay to even talk about, think about, do. And I'm fascinated by it. So if you have anybody else who you think would be an interesting guest to have on this podcast, or any topics that you're interested about on this specific subject, please reach out, send me an email to hello@jenlist.com. You can reach out to me at UntetheredJen on Instagram. I would love to know what the things are that you are interested about, because that last episode that I did, everyone was really interested and I got a lot of really good feedback. And I definitely want this podcast to be on topics that are both interesting to me and interesting to you. So if you want to hear more of this kind of thing, let me know, because I'm fascinated by some of it. I'm curious about a lot of it. And following that curiosity is an act of love to yourself, is an act of love to the world. So let me know. What is it that you're curious about? And if you're curious to learn more about Allison, you can go to all of her links in the show notes. Everything that she mentioned is in the show notes. Go and check her out. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. If there was something that you enjoyed in this episode, if something really clicked with you, if you were intrigued by it, share it with a friend. Then you can have a little discussion about ecstasy and the video game that you are playing here on this planet. If you really enjoyed the episode, you can take a little screenshot of it, share it on social media, and tag me. I will always reshare your posts. I'm UntetheredJen on Instagram. Give me a tag and I will reshare your post. Thank you again so much for listening. You just keep shining your magical unicorn light out there for all to see. I'll see you next time.